So the thing about a presidential debate is, at its core, it is a TV spectacle, and last night was a show. It gave us memorable TV moments, it gave us already classic memes, it gave us a Taylor Swift endorsement. It's the day after the debate. There is a lot to talk about, so let's go. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Listen, we talk all the time about this idea that Donald Trump is a creature of television. Like he was just made for TV and he really thrives on it. But if there was ever a made for TV moment, it was last night when he met Kamala Harris for the very first time ever, face to face, in their first and likely only presidential debate. Listen to this.
And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
That people don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics.
Donald Trump and Kamala Harris showing that Kamala Harris there showing that she too can be a made-for-TV television. We wanted to dig into this and how TV can shape our relationship to politics. Vinson Cunningham wrote a piece for The New Yorker called "The Kamala Show." He's with me now. Vinson, welcome to the show, friend.
Elamin, it's so great to be with you, man. This is great.
Listen, let's get right into it. The goal for the Democrats was to define Kamala Harris for the voters who haven't made up their minds yet. You watched the debate last night. You were live blogging it for The New Yorker. Tell me about your reaction. What did you think?
Well, along those lines, in terms of self-definition, I thought Harris did basically what she wanted to do. From the first question, which, by the way, I don't remember the content of the question because she immediately turned it into a little biography of herself. She was like, I'm a middle-class kid. She talked about her mom. She talked about a cherished family friend. And you could tell that that was part of the brief from the very beginning, to sort of offer this short biography for those who had not, in fact, tuned in to the Kamala show before. So there was definitely some of that going on.
Okay, so according to the New York Times, some of the stuff that we heard reported about this debate was that Kamala was preparing for it with like replica TV lighting, a proper stage. She had one of Clinton's former aides in full method acting mode, just kind of inhabiting the role of Donald Trump. Do we see that effort, that amount of preparation paying off in a show like yesterday?
For sure. Kamala Harris, she took this really interesting tack, which was, I'm going to bait Trump. I'm going to try to get him to show his sort of freaky, weird side by doing things like we heard at the beginning of the segment, like, you know, talking about his the way his rallies go, stuff like that. By the way, like this whole thing of like some aide dresses up as the other candidate. I think the person who did that, his name is Philippe Reines, and he also did that for Hillary Clinton. It's just funny to me that part of your job would be like, every 4 years, I'm going to develop a highly intricate impression so that, like, you know, it's like I got to dust off my Trump again. It's just like I want to interview Philippe about that.
Yeah, Philippe, get in here. It's time for your moment to shine once again. I think so. One very useful hat that you wear is that you're also a theater critic. You're familiar with the way that the debate can be turned into a show. And I think we can think about the debate as a TV show, but also some people experience it as a sequence of social media clips and a sequence of sort of memes, if you will, which is I think how most people end up encountering the debate. Through that lens, it's the morning after. What sticks out for you?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things that will, I think, pop out for people, again, like because TV, especially as you say, in this like little weird way that we watch it now, is all about moments.
Yeah.
Certainly, the moment that you played Kamala Harris, like sort of poking at Trump about his various insufficiencies, whether it's about his rallies or about the way that other world leaders laugh at him. That was another big moment, that these sort of jabs. And then also Trump's continued way with saying odd things, you know, whether it's terrible canards about immigrants and how they conduct themselves in people's neighborhoods, to all kinds of assertions about how he's a leader in vitro fertilization. Just the strangeness of Trump is imminently sort of clippable, and I think that that will continue to be the case after this debate.
I'm glad you brought up some of the weirdness and some of the sort of like frankly unhinged moments that we saw on television.
Absolutely.
Because I want to play one. You know, Kamala Harris was up there with Donald Trump, and we know that he loves cameras, but then like he just had these moments where he kind of there was no other word for it other than unhinged. He demonizes certain groups. You mentioned the idea that he sort of repeated these baseless claims that Haitian immigrants are eating people's pets in Ohio. Let's listen to this.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
Vincent, I don't even know what to do with that. Like, that's obviously getting a lot of reaction. We have to acknowledge also that the way that he speaks sometimes appeals to a lot of Americans. Do you imagine this morning that the Trump campaign is like happy with that snippet making the rounds? Like, was that part of the plan, you think?
They can't be. And this is one of the ways in which I think the ill-advised choice of J.D. Vance as running mate has continued to pay bad dividends for Trump. Before this debate, this was kind of an online thing where J.D. Vance was kind of putting forward this lie and saying, well, even if the people who say this aren't telling the truth, it's uncontested that, like, migrants have murdered American children, all these either distorted or totally untrue claims. And Trump, who is a kind of Hoover for little memes and bits of information from the internet, and then always kind of spins them upward into his rhetoric, of course, picks this up and starts to regurgitate it. So it was a totally unforced error. That was not presented to him as a question. He brought up this eating pets thing unprompted. So I think that will be one of the things that he regrets most. Yeah. Although as you say, some people in his party, some people who vote for him and have done so several times now, don't mind that kind of thing. So it's hard to know exactly where it kind of nets out.
I like the frame of unforced error because that makes me think about how there was a report before the debate that the Kamala campaign wanted unmuted mics. They wanted both candidates to have their mics sort of unmuted so that everybody just sort of has ability to speak whenever. And I think like that's a part of that bait thing that you're talking about, because I think you would have just invited Donald Trump to interrupt in moments that would have maybe even been more absurd than they're eating the pets of the people who live there. Ultimately, the mics ended up being muted. Who do you think that ended up serving, if anybody at all?
I don't think, I think it kind of zeroed out. You could still kind of hear them speaking even when the mics were off, saying like, no, I'd like to answer that. So there was still an element of crosstalk. Yeah. But even the fact that they had that argument that we know that Harris wanted that, I think is a kind of a net positive for Harris, only in that it reminds us that this guy can't be trusted. Right. There is an element of out of control sort of word vomit to him that is unbecoming of a potential president, right? And to the extent that that is something that matters to you, it's good to be reminded of that whenever you can. So even just having the argument about the mics, I think is kind of like vaguely good for Harris, even if it doesn't necessarily move a vote.
Well, one of the surreal parts of this campaign, and there's been so many surreal parts of this campaign as we watch it, is that, to go back to the piece that you wrote, you sort of talk about how up until Joe Biden dropped out of the race, people really didn't conceive of Kamala Harris as a particularly good orator, not someone who makes for great television, in part because her personality off camera doesn't necessarily come through. Let's just take a listen to this.
The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country, pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot.
The idea that she wasn't a good orator was kind of out there. I think you watched this debate yesterday. You have to wonder, has she made up the ground in terms of the way that she's thought of?
Yeah, it's interesting. Her rhetorical strength heretofore has not been on the campaign stump, but rather in the hearing room, the Senate Judiciary Committee, the committees that she has served on, in her role as sort of the prosecuting, question asking, cross-examining prosecutor. And I think debate is a little bit more like that than it is like campaign speech. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
The element of back and forth, the element of direct confrontation is there. And I think she's a little bit better at that than she is at being on the stump. But what that clip also proves is that she is best when she's talking about things that she actually does care about. And the issue of abortion is something that is one of the few threads in her career that has sort of spanned her entire career in a way that makes us think that it's something that really matters to her. And also, she perceives it correctly, I think, as one of her strengths in this election. The first presidential election after, of course, the Dobbs decision that sort of negated Roe v. Wade. So I think that's her pressing her advantages in a way. And you can kind of see the excitement in her, even in her voice and in her physical presentation. You could see it on television, that advantage sort of helped her to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain calm and sort of, she's in her kind of natural element in that particular space. Another thing that jumped out at me about your piece was like your description of Kamala Harris's smile. You call it the smile of common sense. Talk to me a little bit of what you mean about that. How fundamental is that to her appeal, you think?
Well, so much of her, it seems to me, not only her private political philosophy, but the way that she has sort of executed her various offices in public, is to say, look, you may have reservations about the office that I am occupying. You may not trust prosecutors. You may have big problems with the way justice is carried out in San Francisco, in the state of California, in the Senate, right? The ceremonial roles that I inhabit might be things that make you uncomfortable, but I am someone of goodwill. I'm somebody who, this is the kind of like room where it happens philosophy of government, which is like, as long as the right person is in the seat, we can get things done, even if we agree that the system is not ideal. And so this idea of like, she's just a person with common sense. Like if you talk to her away from the podium, away from the hearing room, you'd probably find someone who cares about the things that you care about. I think that almost like subverbal communication from her to the voter is the basis of the whatever we would call her charisma.
And I think if you actually watched the debate yesterday entirely with your television on mute, I think you would have just seen the split screen of Donald Trump sort of looking angry and then Kamala Harris smiling for most of that debate. What does that tell you? The idea that she has, even in that environment, kind of remembered to keep that disposition as a part of the story she's trying to tell.
Yeah, this is totally goes to the issue of debate or the idea, I guess I should say, of debate as television show.
Right.
Part of the thing is to remind people who are on the fence, but who, don't like the Democrats, but probably have some residual distaste for Donald Trump, is to remind in this like direct communication sort of way, like, you don't like this guy, do you? Remember how weird he is? Remember how chaotic it was when he was president?
Yeah.
And to the extent that you can get that across without even having to say a word, I think there's an efficiency to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Vinson, we're not going back, but we are going to move forward here in this conversation because we got to talk about the other news that happened immediately. I'm talking immediately right after the debate. Yeah.
They aren't gonna help us. Too busy helping themselves. They aren't gonna change this. We gotta do it ourselves. They think that it's over, but it's just begun. Only one thing can save us. Only the young.
That is a bit of Taylor Swift with Only the Young. Listen, it's not a song you hear very often. I'm not going to lie to you. Yesterday, Taylor endorsed Kamala Harris as president. I want you to hear Tim Walz hearing live on air for the very first time that Taylor has endorsed Kamala.
All those things, I am incredibly grateful, first of all, to Taylor Swift. I say that also as a cat owner, a fellow cat owner. Look, this would be the opportunity, Swifties. KamalaHarris.com. Get on over there. Give us a hand. Get things going.
Look, there's been a lot of anticipation for this moment. Honestly, I was surprised that it happened this early. Tyler Foggatt is here, and she is also, I think, surprised it happened this early. Hi, Tyler. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me here.
Yes, of course. It's also a delight. It's a delight to have both Vinson and Tyler on because you guys are both colleagues who spent much of the night talking yesterday, and then you're here with us.
That's
Tyler, look, we're both Swifties. I think there was this anticipation that, Taylor would endorse Kamala at some point. I didn't think it would be this early. I didn't think it would be this full-throated endorsement. Are you as surprised as I am?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it speaks to the power of Taylor Swift and her longtime publicist Tree Payne that Taylor has managed to do something that is honestly pretty expected in a completely unexpected way, that also brings the most possible attention to it.
Yeah.
I think, I recently did a piece for The New Yorker about the power of the celebrity endorsement. And when I did that piece, I was speaking to some Democratic strategists who told me that, there was this rumor that Taylor Swift was going to appear at the DNC. And these strategists told me that, actually the best thing that Taylor could do is, not appear at the DNC, but just do something, further down the line, something that brings a lot of attention to the campaign. Ideally, there's like a vibesy aspect to it. So in the same way that Charlie XCX tweeted that Kamala is brat, the best thing would be either for Taylor to bring Kamala on stage at the Eras Tour or to create some kind of viral moment, which I think is exactly what Taylor did with the, signing off her Instagram post endorsing Harrison Walls with childless cat lady.
Yeah.
I think I'm pretty surprised by how this went down, but I'm not surprised that it happened.
Well, I mean, like Vincent mentioned this earlier, the idea that JD Vance is such like a gaffe machine on this campaign. The idea that Taylor would sign her endorsement with childless cat lady in reference to a JD Vance comment that he made a few weeks ago. It's sort of, if I was, I can imagine if you're Donald Trump, you're like, you did it again, JD. You really gave, you gave the other side some weapons to use here. I gotta say, Tyler, like the last few days have been particularly fraught for Swifties because Taylor Swift has been photographed with Brittany Mahomes. She's a wife of Kansas City quarterback Patrick Mahomes. And there was this speculation that Brittany herself is a Trump supporter. We don't know whether she is or not, but we know that Trump personally has thanked her on social media many times. How do you think the Brittany Mahomes side plot figures into Taylor Swift's decision to endorse?
A couple things. I mean, I think, there's definitely the narrative that part of the reason why she endorsed so quickly rather than doing something at the Eras Tour or further down the line is that she was getting so much vitriol online for hanging out with a presumed Trump supporter that she kind of had to come out and say something, like it was starting to be a PR crisis. But I think the other thing is that hanging out with Brittany Mahomes and also just showing that she doesn't actively detest people who might be Republican or who might like Trump is, I think it's actually something that'll help the endorsement go further. These strategists that I mentioned earlier, I mean, they were talking about how an endorsement just does so much more when the person who is endorsing seems somewhat apolitical. And so I think that even though Swift, made a documentary a few years ago coming out as a Democrat and endorsed, Biden and Harris in 2020.
Yeah.
The fact that she was hanging out with a Trump supporter or, someone who's allegedly a Trump supporter right before endorsing just makes her seem more apolitical and more reasonable, honestly. Yeah. She's like us. It's like she can, have Thanksgiving dinner with her Trump supporting uncle, but still vote for Harris. And so I think that that'll speak to people.
Vincent, I don't know what your relationship is to the Taylor Swift universe. Tyler and I are both on the record as just like gigantic Swifties. That's the thing we talk about. But Vincent, I'm going to ask you about the timing, because like this debate had barely ended, and then she drops this endorsement. She did a similar thing at the Grammys. All these artists are getting their flowers, and then she chooses that moment to announce that she's releasing a new album, and she got a lot of criticism for that. There is something about Taylor Swift that sort of lends itself to the accusation that she's sucking up all the oxygen in the room. Do you think that applies here? Like, is there something to be said for letting Kamala have her post-debate moment and then announcing the next day? Or does that actually like make a difference at all, you think?
Well, I found that weird from not the Swift perspective, but from the Harris perspective. Specifically wondering whether this was done in coordination with the Harris campaign. Like to do it directly after the debate bespeaks some level of coordination that I would love to know more about. I don't know if we'll ever get that information. But it's not September 21st yet. So this is technically still a cruel summer, according to some Swiftology. I don't know. And so I think like she is someone who can sort of, with a kind of like maybe cruel, maybe just sort of blank, like efficiency, notice moments. This is her great gift, it seems to me, is the gift of timing, that she not only knows the power of her voice, but when it is most powerfully deployed. To me, it seems like maybe good. It's like, hey, here's a debate where Harris, we could say, I think most people think she won, but that doesn't mean that there's an avalanche in the polls that's happening. Right. So maybe to put an exclamation point on a good night is a good use of the resource that is Taylor Swift.
I should say, like Tyler, like immediately after the debate, you know, the Harris campaign started selling friendship bracelets, and so it's not like this was. It certainly gives off the impression that Vincent is talking about, the idea that this was coordinated. What do you make of the timing? Do you think she's stealing Kamala's thunder, or do you think she's sort of adding to the push?
I think she's adding to it. I think that this was unequivocally a positive thing for Harris. And I totally agree with Vincent. I mean, even the way that the post was written, where it's, you know, sort of like many of you, I watched the debate last night. I feel like my takeaway from the post was, one, Taylor Swift is endorsing Kamala Harris, and two, Kamala Harris totally won the debate. And I think that a lot of people, even if they're not necessarily fans of Taylor Swift and aren't the kinds of voters to be moved by her in a genuine way, I think that they walk away with this feeling that clearly Harris won, or else why would, you know, arguably the most famous person in the world be endorsing her directly after, you know, her encounter with Trump.
Vincent, there is somebody listening to this conversation right now going, I mean, how valuable can a Taylor Swift endorsement really be? What's your read on this? Like, does it matter? Does it make a difference at all? How valuable is it?
Well, to me, it speaks to what I think is the great necessity for Democrats in this election, which is not necessarily persuasion, but enthusiasm. Right? If more people show out in the places that they show out, whatever, in the places that they need votes, that's good for them. I think high turnout is good for the Democrats in this election, like it is in most elections.
Sure.
And nobody draws a crowd like Taylor Swift. So that, and Taylor Swift now, because of her sort of romantic relationship, is on our TVs most Sundays in front of lots of big crowds. For me, it's a get out the vote move. And I think, you know, it could matter on the margin. Sure.
I think, like, Tyler, when we talked about this, we had a pre-tape about this yesterday. And in no way did we anticipate that Taylor was going to announce that endorsement, which is why you're here now live. And I really appreciate it. But something that you sort of brought up yesterday is this idea that, like, she is sort of capable of appealing to a wide swath of people. And the idea that, like, Brittany Mahomes' involvement in the public sphere of Taylor Swift actually lends itself to Taylor becoming more credible when she says, you know what, I'm still on Kamala's side, even though I have some friends who might be Republican. It is worth noting that Taylor will resume her tour again in October. And, like, she's got dates in Florida and she's got dates in Indianapolis. And, like, those are places where Democrats might actually need the help. The idea that this endorsement might play into the resumption of the Eras Tour is already kind of out there. Do you see that being a part of her sort of resuming the tour at all? Or do you think we're going to keep the music and the endorsement separate for now?
My guess is that it's going to be pretty separate. I might be biased, but I was supposed to attend one of Taylor Swift's concerts in Vienna a few weeks ago, and it was canceled essentially because it was being targeted by ISIS. And after that concert cancellation, Taylor Swift went on Instagram and basically posted something that was like, I will never do anything that puts my fans at risk. And a lot of people actually took that message to mean that Taylor wasn't going to be endorsing anyone in the election. Like, she was just going to be silent, apolitical, not do anything to, you know, sort of bring negative attention to her. And so I think that I'm glad that she didn't just decide to stay silent, because I think she's famous enough that she could have gotten away with staying silent and it wouldn't have damaged her in any real way. But my guess is that, I don't know, I would be surprised if the tour changes in any, you know, genuine way because of the endorsement. But I think, like, you know, Taylor can now go into the tour without a bunch of people online, you know, gossiping about whether or not she's a secret Republican.
As they say, you know, the quote often in the fandom is, "The devil works hard, but tree pain works harder." And this is truly has come to pass in this particular incident. Vincent and Tyler, I appreciate you guys being here. I appreciate you shedding light on this. Thank you so much for your time and for being here.
Thanks so much, man.
Thank you.
Of course, my pleasure. Tyler Foggatt is a senior editor at The New Yorker. Vincent Cunningham writes for The New Yorker. He also co-hosts their weekly podcast, Critics at Large.
It keeps me awake, the look on your face, the moment you heard the